So first off, can you tell me how you feel a little bit about how the Senators are doing today?
I'm thrilled. I mean, it's fabulous. When we had the vision to bring the Senators back to Ottawa, we always envisioned that they would become part of the fabric of the community, and they clearly have. We also believe that the fans would support the team the way they clearly have. And despite the fact I'm working in Pittsburgh now, there's a special place in my heart for the Sens, and delighted to see them doing so well.
Excellent. What was your background before you became involved with the Senators?
I played hockey at the U.S. collegiate level and in the OHL and the Quebec League. And I had finished my MBA, had coached at U.S. College, and came back to Ottawa. Took a job with a young entrepreneur named Bruce Firestone at a company called Terrace Investments. And playing pickup hockey one day, Bruce launched the idea that he wanted to pursue an NHL expansion franchise. We were young and probably naive and full of enthusiasm, and we said, why not? Let's give it a go.
So as soon as Bruce said that, what was your immediate reaction? What was the first thing in your mind?
Well, the first thing in mind was, wow, we have a chance to win a Stanley Cup. Wouldn't it be a cool thing to have your name on the Stanley Cup and bring the Stanley Cup back to Ottawa, its rightful home? But then as we got into the process, you realized it was fraught with peril, a lot of challenges, a tremendous opportunity, but through a lot of very hard work by a lot of people, some good fortune, and a lot of intellectual capacity by Bruce and Rod Bryden, we were able to make it happen.
What was your role in the expansion?
Initially, my role was to head the whole thing because we didn't know if we would get much traction. So Bruce decided to pull me out of my day-to-day real estate responsibilities and kind of headed up because I had a hockey background and I knew some of the owners. But as we started to gain momentum, obviously more and more people came into the fold. So the biggest thing I did, I worked with Cyril to generate corporate support and community support, and my primary responsibilities were really to get meetings, one-on-one private meetings with the owners and the GMs in the league to make our pitch, to build relationships, to try and influence them to be comfortable with us enough to grant us a franchise.
Okay. Did you really believe you were going to be successful when you applied for a team?
Absolutely. Never a doubt in my mind.
Okay. What was the bit of the process of submitting an expansion bid?
Well, there was the public process and the private process. The public process was a very high profile. Hockey, NHL hockey in Canada, as you can imagine, had a very high public profile both with the community and with the media. And that was a process. We had to fill out applications. We had to deliver certain types of capabilities. We had to prove we could sell season tickets and get corporate sponsorship. The private side was the ongoing lobbying and the building of the relationship with the Board of Governors, who were essentially the owners, with the league executive, and with the hockey people, the general managers and the assistant GMs, so that collectively everybody in another NHL organization felt comfortable that we as owners in Ottawa and Ottawa as a city-supported franchise were worthy of being in the NHL.
So just to backtrack a little bit, what was the timeline for when all this was going on, for when the idea was hatched, the time when you were doing this?
Well, it's a few years ago. My recollection was we played pickup hockey at Lions Arena, I want to say in about 1988. Bruce hatched the idea. We spent the next 6 months doing a lot of due diligence and groundwork, and then went public with it in '89, and we were granted a franchise about 18 months later, 1990, to start playing in 1992.
Okay. What would you say the reaction from the City of Ottawa was when you first announced this?
When we first announced that we were going to pursue a franchise, there were clearly two camps. There were the enthusiastic hockey fans, and there was the skeptics. And I would say that the larger group, although the quieter group, were the enthusiastic fans. The skeptics tended to be a little more vocal, but we were very focused on what we had to achieve. We fundamentally believed that we could accomplish our goal, and we did our best to convince the cynics, but we used and worked with the enthusiasts to build momentum for our bid.
Can you tell me specifically some of the things that the skeptics said?
Oh, they said Ottawa was a government town. It could never support a franchise. They said the Ottawa Nationals of WHA failed. Why would the NHL? Ottawa's too small. Why would the NHL come here? Ottawa's Canada. Why would they come here? Who are you guys? You know, Firestone's 35, Sexton and Leader are 30 years old. Who are you guys? When in reality, everything that they poo-pooed, quite candidly, worked to our advantage. Hockey is Canada, and the owners of the National Hockey League understand that very clearly. the support that we garnered from our community was far better than support for other expansion franchises south of the U.S. border. So we believed that it was kind of counterintuitive. Everything that people said, the reasons why we wouldn't get a franchise actually were strengths of our bid. And although it wasn't clear to certain members of the media and certain cynics, it was very clear to the people who made the decision, and that's the Board of Governors of the NHL.
Okay. What were some of the other very early hardships you had right after you announced your intention?
Well, we always knew and always were clear that we needed financial support from the community. So in the terms of corporate sponsorship, season tickets, absolute, total support. But we also needed equity partners, and we had hit a recession in the late 80s, which was a deep recession and a difficult recession. And despite the interest of a lot of the business leaders in Ottawa, it was difficult to get them to come to the table with an equity investment. We were successful in getting enough partners, the original founders of the Ottawa Senators. This community should be forever grateful to those people, because without their hard-earned investment dollars, the Sens wouldn't be around today.
Do you think that those people you just mentioned, do you think they've really been misrepresented, the people who really helped this team come?
No, not at all. I don't. I think they've been very well represented. They've certainly been represented to the level that they were comfortable. Many of them were just private people, and they were private businessmen. A lot of them did it, quite candidly, not because they believed it was a great investment. They believed it was great for our community. And ultimately, the team went bankrupt, so that, I guess, confirmed their belief that it might not have been a great investment. But look what the Senators have done for this community, and clearly their vision of the Senators and NHL hockey being good for the community was spot on.
Can you tell me a little bit who Frank Finnegan was and what his role was in your expansion bid?
Frank played for the original Ottawa Senators in the 30s. He was a wonderful, wonderful mentor to us. He was a wonderful inspiration to us. Frank passed away not long after we were granted the franchise, and he was just a wonderful elder statesman who helped us in the bid. He lobbied to John Ziegler, the then president of the National Hockey League. He lobbied on our behalf, and I know when Frank passed, he had a warm heart knowing that the Sens were back in Ottawa.
Okay. What were the difficulties associated with the NDP government in getting Scotiabank Place built?
Well, they fundamentally had a philosophy about agricultural land, and we had assembled 600 acres of very low class, low quality agricultural land. So there was a fundamental difference of opinion about whether we should rezone agricultural land for commercial use. So we had to go through an entire OMB process to convince and prove to the OMB that we were worthy of having the land rezoned, and it did. And clearly, if you think about it from first principles, the quality of the agricultural land was class 5 or 6, which is almost, or is the worst quality of land. So it wasn't like we were going to have an incredibly productive farm yield there. More importantly, if you look at the economic impact that the Senators and Scotiabank Place have had on this community, it far outweighs the loss of a few hundred acres of low-quality agricultural land.
Now, what was also the difficulties with the Carp River in building Scotiabank Place?
That was just a red herring. It was just another tool that some of the cynics and the NDP tried to use to derail the bid. But if anybody's ever been down the Carp River, river is a misnomer. It's nothing more than a creek. And to consider it a navigable waterway in anything other than a kayak is preposterous.
Was there ever a fear you might lose the franchise?
No, I don't think so. After Bruce Firestone sold his ownership share to Rod Bryden, anybody who knows Rod knows that he is, without a doubt, one of the most brilliant businessmen ever to work in Ottawa. He's one of the most brilliant financial engineers ever to work in Canada, I believe. And through Rod's brilliance and his relationships on Bay Street and in Toronto, primarily the financial center of Canada, Rod was able to keep this franchise afloat. Quite candidly, if it weren't for Rod and his financial brilliance, the team would be long gone.
Okay. What were some other difficulties you had in securing the team?
The primary challenges were the rezoning of the land, which the NDP tried to stop but ultimately lost. getting equity partners to partner with us to provide enough equity to purchase the franchise. And certainly in the early days, not early days, we had great success. In the kind of years 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, just building the depth and strength of the business enough to support where the business was going to ensure that the Sens stayed here.
Okay, so how well do you remember the day when you found out that you were going to be successful and you were granted an expansion franchise?
I remember like it was yesterday.
All right, so can you take me through that in depth?
Absolutely. I had built a lot of good relationships at the National Hockey League level, at the ownership level, at the executive level, at the staff level. And we had made a presentation. We knew we had made some great points. We knew we had good momentum. We knew we believe we're going to be successful, but until you actually hear the word, we're going to grant you a franchise, you never really know for sure. So I got a note in my mailbox at the Breakers Hotel saying, have everybody assembled at 1 p.m. So as you can imagine, the tension and the anxiety was fairly high. So Bruce went for a jog. Jim Durrell, at the time the mayor, was out walking on the golf course. Several people from our group were just trying to burn off the anxiety. So we rallied them together. We sat in a room, and at about 12:30, Bruce said, guys, we gave it a great go, but I really don't think we're going to be successful. And there was mixed feelings in the room about whether Bruce was correct or not. So at 1 o'clock, they came to get us. And before we left, I said, you know what, guys, we're going to get this franchise. And Jim Durrell said, we're going to get the franchise. And I was trying to get some nod from the NHL staffer to say, you know, thumbs up, wink. And he said, Randy, I can't tell you. The governors will give you the decision. So they take us down the outside fire escape at the Breakers into the basement. We're stepping over bags of potatoes. It's really quite dreary. And I remember Jim Durrell saying to me, Randy, I don't think this is the way they treat the winners. And I said, no, Jimmy, but I think we're still going to get it. So we come up this back stairwell into this large meeting room, and we're there by ourselves. And we had heard that there was a bid from Tampa Bay, represented by Phil Esposito, and a bid from St. Petersburg, led by Peter Karmanos, the now owner in Carolina. We had heard that Karmanos was going to get the team. In through the door comes Phil Esposito and his group, and he starts to scream and shout and high-five his members, we're in, we're in. And of course, we had the opposite emotion. I said, Phil, I don't think so. I've been hearing it St. Pete's is in, and if we're in the same room with you, it's not good. He said, Randy, I had a member of the Board of Governors tell me last night, it's Ottawa for sure and one other team, and if we're in the same room with you, we're in. So they were ecstatic. We were quite subdued. The staffer from the league comes, takes us down the hall, and I'll never forget, I thought to myself, I've been kind of the front face of this thing for the last number of years. I want to be the first guy to get either the great news or the bad news. We walked through the door. The Board of Governors stood up, gave us a standing ovation. I've got chills now telling you the story. Standing ovation. We were ecstatic. Tampa Bay was ecstatic, but Bruce was in a bit of a trance. He was in the middle of the group. He didn't even clue into what was going on. He sat down. He sat down at a chair, and he saw the draft press release that John Ziegler had drafted saying National Hockey League, under the plan of 6 expansion, is pleased to grant franchises to the cities representing Ottawa and Tampa Bay. And then he kind of came to, saw the celebration, and that was it. It was an incredible lifetime experience, and that particular day is a day that and a memory I'll take to my grave.
Excellent. So what was the reaction in Ottawa? Do you know when that was first announced?
Well, it was ecstatic. Thousands of people have told me their response, and they're really, it was one of those moments where people today can tell you, I remember where I was when they announced the Sens, Ottawa had got the franchise. And there was the emotion of disbelief. There was the emotion of ecstasy. There was the emotion, the cynics were saying, well, they got the franchise, but they'll never pay for it. So it was a swirling of emotion of all sorts in the city of Ottawa. But if you had to wrap a blanket around it all, it would be one of elation.
Excellent. What were some of the difficulties you had after the franchise?
Well, clearly, raising the equity and getting the right mix of equity and debt to make sure the franchise was stable financially was a challenge. We had to fight the NDP to get approval to build the Palladium, now Scotiabank Place. We were in the depth of a very difficult recession, so raising the capital and getting the structure together, the right ownership structure together to make sure that the Palladium could come together in the right financial structure that would allow it to be successful long term was a challenge.
I've heard that the song "Don't Back Down" was your theme song when you were through this process. Is that true?
That's very true. That's very true. Very true. Don't Back Down was a song that happened to be popular at the time. Tom Petty, I think, sings "Don't Back Down," and Bruce kind of adopted it, embraced it as our theme song. It became part of the culture at the Senators, both before, during, and after the franchise was awarded. And to this day, every time I hear Tom Petty playing "Don't Back Down" on the radio, I get chills and have flashbacks of some sort of memory from those times.
Would you say that phrase was really sort of your group's catchphrase, like something you really took to heart?
It really was. It was a rallying cry for us because nobody, and I mean nobody, other than the enthusiastic hockey fan, gave us any chance. Nobody in the media thought we would do it. The local, the municipal, the provincial, the federal government hoped we would, but they would never come out and say so because there were competing bids from Hamilton, Halifax, and others. So nobody really thought we could do it except us. And the only way, some of those difficult days, the only way we could get through it was sticking together and believing we're not backing down from anybody or anything. We're going to make this happen.
Excellent. So who were really the people, would you say, that really kept your group together in situations like that?
Well, it was not, there really wasn't one particular person. It's a long process. What we went through was an extended marathon, not a sprint, although we were sprinting as great marathoners do. At any particular time, it was Bruce, it was Jim Durrell, it was Cyril Leader, it was myself, it was Mark Bono, Jeff Kyle, Bernie Ash, any number of the executive team, because it was a long, hard grind. And I think it was one of the strengths that allowed us to actually get there was that we had strength in numbers, and we believed in each other, we believed in our cause. And after Rod Bryden got involved on the financing side, that helped us take care of that difficult issue, because without him it wouldn't have happened. So we were a team, and like any great team, at some time different people rise to the occasion and take a leadership role, and that's how we function.
Similar to the day you got the franchise, how well do you remember opening night at the Civic Center?
I remember it very well.
Again, take me through that.
Well, it was a spectacular night, and I remember it was obviously sold out, and I remember asking our ticket guy for 4 tickets that I wanted to randomly give away to people in the community. And as I drove down for the morning skate that day, I stopped and got gas in Bell's Corners. The young teenage boy who was serving me recognized me, chatted it up. I gave him a ticket. The look on his face was incredible. I did that 3 or 4 times during the day. So it was really intended to try and spread some of the great things that the Sens were doing. We had a large dinner before the game. We had an absolutely incredible opening ceremonies that Randy Burgess and Patty Zubchuk pulled together for us. Was phenomenal. And then, the icing on the cake was we beat the Montreal Canadiens, which was incredible. And I'll never forget the look in the face of Rick Bowness, our head coach, Alain Vigneault, E.J. McGuire, assistant coaches. They were so fired up because we knew it would be a long, difficult season. And afterwards, to be candid, we partied hard because it had been about 2 years of 16 to 20-hour days nonstop, round the clock, and to have it all come together in our hometown, in our city, to prove all the naysayers wrong and beat the Habs, who we knew we'd have a long-time rival with, was an incredible lifetime feeling.
Excellent. So how did you go about choosing your players?
Well, Mel Bridgman was our initial GM, and Mel, we hired John Ferguson Sr. and a group of other people who are still involved in the National Hockey League today to do the scouting and to pull together the lists of potential players. We had access to 3 types of players. We had access to the players in the amateur draft, we had an expansion draft, and we had free agency. We didn't have a very big budget. My recollection is the first year of operation, our salary budget for our NHL team and our American League team was 5.1 million Canadian dollars total. There's probably 300 players in the NHL who make more than that today. So We accessed players every way that we could, but we knew we were going to struggle in the early days, and that, quite candidly, that was part of our strategy. We knew we had to build through the draft, which is still the best way to build your team today. And we knew that we were going to take our lumps. We clearly believed the City of Ottawa and the Canadian market understood the need to do so. We believed they would support us in that process. And we had a strategy of competing for and winning the Stanley Cup in 7 to 12 years. And that strategy was executed, and in year 12, 11 or 12, the Sens were in the Stanley Cup final against Anaheim.
Excellent. So I'm just going to backtrack to opening night a little bit. Would you say there's a real hype in the organization around that night?
Oh my goodness, yeah. I mean, it's difficult to describe the work and the effort and the pain and the stress and the elation that you go through to make something like this happen. And opening night was kind of the coming out party, kind of the crescendo for everybody in the organization. To have an opportunity to feel proud about the work they had done, to feel great about what was happening in the city of Ottawa, what was happening in our great country of Canada with another NHL expansion team. So that night captured all of those emotions, all of that feeling, and it was a night that I think everybody who was in attendance that night will remember for a very, very long time.
Okay. Do you have any regrets looking back over how the whole process went?
None, not a regret. I've been incredibly fortunate and blessed, quite honestly, to have been involved in the process. It gave me a lifetime of incredible experience in 2 years, and experience that I've been able to draw on the last 25 years of my career. And having done it with Bruce and Rod and Cyril and Bernie Ash and Mark Bono and Jeff Kyle and Jim Steele and all the other people that some of whom I grew up with us from a very early age to work together to make something like this happen, to leave a legacy in our community is something I'm extremely grateful for and will be very proud of till the day I die.
I'm sure I'm not the first person to ask you this, but would you have done the Alexander Daig situation immediately?
No, quite candidly. Alex was the best player in the draft at that time. That's one of the vagaries of the 18-year-old draft. If we would have been able to look 3 years ahead and say, boy, Chris Pronger or Paul Kariya are good players, but anybody who says otherwise in the NHL, everybody in the NHL would have drafted Alexander Daig first that year. He was the most dynamic player as an 18-year-old. He didn't turn into the best player of that group as a 23-year-old, but at 18 he was. And we needed to put our franchise on the map. We felt that we needed to sign a long-term deal with him to lock up his services because we believed in him, and we did what we thought was appropriate for our franchise.
Okay. How was it to see Scotiabank Place going up?
Phenomenal. I'm sure it exists in the Sens archive somewhere. There's a time-lapse film of it. Somebody went out at the same time every day and took a shot of what was happening. I used to go out every day. We bought a house on a lot that overlooked it that served as a construction office, and there was a kind of a observation deck up above the house. I would go up there every day and watch it happen for 10 or 15 minutes. It was a phenomenal feeling to see it come out of the ground and actually turn into what it is today.
How well do you remember opening night at the Palladium?
Not as well, obviously. I had left the Senators organization by that time, and it was a interesting time in my life and my career. I do remember playing Montreal. I do remember we lost, which was unfortunate, but I do remember being absolutely taken aback with what an incredible job Cyril Leader and his team had done in terms of designing and building the Palladium. It is, in my opinion, probably the best building in the National Hockey League. It's not the biggest, it's not the most ostentatious, but in terms of fan comfort, aesthetics, acoustics, sight lines, I think it's if not the best, certainly top 5 in all the National Hockey League.
Okay. What would you say long-term being part of this has done for you?
Well, it certainly exposed me to a network of global business leaders that I might never have been able to accomplish in my entire working life. It caused me to think on a global scale, not a local scale. It allowed me to experience something that it allowed me to gain experience that causes me to look at things in a totally different light than I might otherwise would have from having lived through the experience and the ups and downs and you know, the obstacles and overcoming all the challenges. And to this day, don't back down's, you know, a quiet part of my mantra. It doesn't matter what we do, whether it's my family life, my social life, or my professional life. A lot of people out there will tell you no. They'll tell you many different ways. But, you know, if you're a young person and you're wanting to start your career, the best advice I could give you is don't back down and never take no for an answer.
All right. What would you say long-term this has done for the community?
Well, it's touched the community in many different ways. I remember one of our original partners was Joe Aegis, was a very successful Ottawa businessman. And when I asked him why he was investing, he said, I don't expect to ever get a nickel of return, but I go to Florida every year and it drives me crazy when I pull up a chair by the pool, somebody asks me where I'm from, and I say Ottawa, and they don't know where that is. And after we got the franchise in early January, I was at my desk, the phone rang. He said, Randy, it's Joe Aegis. I said, Joe, how are you? He said, great. I just wanted to tell you, I just got to Florida. I said, that's great, Joe. Everything okay? He said, it gets better. The guy pulled up a chair beside me. He asked where I was from. When I told him Ottawa, he said, hey, didn't you guys just get those senators? And he said, I don't care if I ever get a nickel of return on my investment. I accomplished what I want to accomplish. So it's a long-winded story to say we've raised the profile of Ottawa on a global scale. Number two, I think to a large degree, the senators have really triggered the private sector growth in this community. We have a very healthy and thriving private sector dominated primarily by the technology, but lots of other service businesses. The senators pump millions and millions of dollars every year of economic activity into the community. The Senators Foundation has reinvested tens of millions of dollars into good works and charitable works in the community here. And quite candidly, if they took the senators away and they disappeared forever, this community would never, ever, ever be the same as it is today.
Excellent. It's all the questions I have for you right now. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about on the subject that I may have missed?
No, I think you, if you don't want to talk about modern day, you want to talk about the history. I think you covered it well.